Hi everyone, namaste and a very good evening and a good morning to all of you who are joining us wherever you are around the world. Welcome to a very special webinar that we're hosting here. I'm from Colombo and we've got a fantastic set of panelists joining us from India as well as other parts of the world, where we'll discuss as we take you through a very interesting topic that we're about to talk on: offensive and defensive strategies against all odds. We want to say a very big thank you to all our invitees who registered themselves and taken time to be a part of today's session, and also for your feedback on the previous sessions that we have conducted as well. On to the main discussion point or the synopsis for today. In terms of Infopercept webinar, Infopercept Global MSSP has grown and evolved as one of the innovative cybersecurity companies globally, as for Infopercept understand attackers' mindset. And today's cybersecurity industry is at a war with adversaries, and adversaries are always deceived because of their tactics, techniques, and procedures. Day on, day in, day out, we see a different new kind of a virus that we hear from different sources, and we want to see solutions. As for a company, as for an individual, how can we support you? And that's what this webinar is all about. We at Infopercept have closely observed patterns of cyber criminals and wanted to create a platform that helps organizations to overcome at par with adversaries. In InVinSense, a comprehensive integrated platform that combines security solutions, services, and strategy by actionable intelligence from understanding attackers' sense to provide invisible protection to organizations against cyber criminals. So we have a fantastic set of panelists today who's joining us in discussion to tell you more comprehensive details. Plus, we're having a little bit of an engagement session, getting to know feedback as to how much or how satisfied you are through a number of surveys. And now to introduce you to my panelists, joining us is Darrell Brown, as he joined Masco as Director IT Security in July 2020. He's responsible for ensuring global information security in collaboration with key stakeholders across the Masco enterprise. He oversees the governance and security aspects of enterprise systems, ensuring technology, processes, and governance are in place to monitor, detect, prevent, and react to potential threats to businesses. Before joining Masco, Brown spent 4 years at La-Z-Boy Incorporated as Information Security Manager, following 9 years as Information Assurance Program Manager for the U.S. Army's Program Executive Office, and this is to combat support and combat service support. And he retired as a Chief Intelligence Specialist from the Navy Reserve with 23 years combined military experience. He's Certified Information Systems Security Professional, a Certified Information Systems Auditor, a Certified Ethical Hacker, a Certified IT Level 3 Defense Acquisition Workforce Improvement Act, and hold a JIAC Continuous Monitoring Certification. And he earned a bachelor's degree in Security Management, Information Security, and a master's degree in Homeland Security, Counterterrorism from the American Military University. We're very, very, very honored to have with us Darrell Brown from the US. Good evening, good morning, Darrell.
Good morning, and thank you for that kind introduction.
So great to have you with us, and it's a real honor to have a profile like you joining in our webinar, and we'll see how today's session goes. Our next panelist is Robert Casement, who loves to enable business by securing people and their information in the team sport of information security. Robert is highly adept to enabling groups to harness their collective wisdom by braiding people, processes, and technology to enhance their security, and that is on posture. Robert became a highly valued consultant to 2 of the largest banks in the United States, a major stock exchange in New York, 7 auto manufacturers, nonprofits, including a nonprofit with over 1 million constituents. He has also been a VP of fraud strategy from a major US bank with $55 billion in assets, where he managed to implementation of a large-scale intelligence systems. I bet there's going to be a lot of people sending in messages on LinkedIn today asking for strategies, how to execute, etc. But Robert is also a CISO of Global Tier 1 auto supplier, Jackson Dawson Communications, a global supplier of experiential marketing services, including creation of bespoke, augmented, and virtual reality software. Good morning, Robert. Great to have you with us.
Glad to be here.
And joining us from my part of the region, very honored to have with us the Director Information Security Strategy for Infopercept Consulting. As a co-founding member of Infopercept, he's involved in strategy and nurturing relationships across the globe. And before Infopercept, worked with Allied Digital Services, MIELE Security, Elite Code Technologies. In this phase, a Crystal Solutions were starting a role of networking security engineer to chief technology officer to drive global team and establish practices. Very honored to have with us Jaydeep Ruparelia from Infopercept. Good evening, Jaydeep.
Good evening, Sharon. Thanks for the introduction. Thank you, Robert and Darren, for joining us. Thanks to all the audience who have joined us. And let's see how we help each other. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm Sharon Mascreen is joining from Colombo, Sri Lanka, and we're going to make this a very interesting session, giving all our speakers 3 minutes based on the topic or point of question that we're asking. And we also have a survey that we are going to go, which is within 30 seconds. We want you to answer just by clicking on the screen. That's how simple it is. By welcoming all of you, we have our first point that we'd like to dive into first. Cyber attackers are infiltrating networks and invading detection by hijacking the infrastructure of major corporations. They're always on the lookout, isn't it? And they want to see their opportunities by using it against them. Attackers use deceptive tactics to dominate corporate networks. What have you seen in terms of deceptive attacks on the corporate networks? We like to see the audience views here on the overall, but who would like to start? Darrell, would you like to start on this one?
Sure, thank you. So some of the attacks that we're currently seeing are still in that business email compromises where they're taking advantage of the quick or rapid deployment of our workforce to a work from home environment, having to more highly leverage our cloud environments, trying to make sure that we are seeing as much of that as possible, but that's one of the big ones that we've seen. The other things that we're seeing are the attackers' abilities to take the crisis to zero and actually build upon that in spinning up new environments consistently. Matter of fact, as fast as a crisis comes out, you will see a website spinning up in the thousands so that they can take advantage of that. And then finally, they're using the phishing techniques, right? So the phishing techniques that they're using these compromised websites, these domains, to actually break in and cause confusion for us.
Okay, Robert, what do you think?
We've seen about a 20% increase each month in the amount of phishing attempts, and we also see increasing sophistication of those phishing attacks. So we've put a lot of emphasis in our company on awareness training and users, and they are getting better, and they're noticing that the attacks are more sophisticated. And those attacks, obviously, as Darrell pointed out, they have backing behind them where there are things like websites that people can refer to check out the suspect email, and then they think it is legitimate. So certainly phishing attacks are on the rise, business email compromise. We see in a COVID era, we see more and more attempts further out in our supply chain. So workers working from home, we've run into challenges there with people's home networks, for example, and people changing passwords on their home router device. So those are some of the things we've seen.
All right, thanks, Robert. Thanks, Darrell. Jaydeep, how do you see this towards our region?
Yeah, as a managed security service provider, we have seen a lot of different kinds of new attacks that has happened, as rightly mentioned by Darrell and Robert. We've seen a lot of email compromise where we've seen good amount of phishing attacks happening. We've seen a lot of customers for their digital journey moving on cloud. So a lot of places where cloud environments have been attacked. We have seen endpoint since people have moved work from home and the controls were not ready. We've seen a lot of customers getting impacted with the endpoint compromise as well. So a lot of different techniques in which adversaries have been successful.
All right, thanks a lot for your feedback. We'd like to ask a question from the audience. What is the most common form of deceptive technique being used for attacks? Is it phishing campaign, or is it social engineering, hardware, software, vulnerability or exploit, or application attacks? All you have to do is just click on one of these, or just to see how much of a progress do we see. So we've got 30 seconds and we'd like to see feedback from the people. We see 177 people who have joined us online. Thank you for joining us. And it's great to hear as to what is your stand? What is the most common form of deceptive technique being used? So we had us panelists who are sharing that phishing campaign is more popular, but we'd like to hear it from the audience. And what that's been said, I think time's up for us to get an update, and we'll be getting an update on it soon. Okay, looks like 59% is that phishing campaign, 32% with social engineering, 5% and 5% with hardware and application. So phishing it is. Darrell, based on the statistics that you see, how much of a preparation do we have to focus ourselves on? Darrell?
The realm that we see with the sorry about that. The realm that we're seeing with the phishing campaign and social engineering is that's the quickest vector for attackers to actually come in and take advantage of an environment. We can put all the technology in the world in front of that, but it doesn't prevent somebody from the user space being able to go in and click and take us past and go into an environment that would circumvent the trust that we have in our users.
All right. I'm going to move on to the next discussion point that I have. When discussing cybersecurity, the terms of red team and blue team are often mentioned, long associated with the military, and these terms are used to describe teams that use their skills to imitate the attack techniques that enemies might use, and the other teams that use skills to defend. In cybersecurity, there isn't much of a difference that we focus here, but have you used the red team, blue team concepts for your operations, Robert? Robert, I think you're on mute. We all seem to love the mute button. Yeah. Could you? We'll get that sorted. Is there?
I'm here.
Okay, great.
So
yes,
yes, I've used red team, blue team in various organizations where I've worked, and I've found it valuable in 3 areas: in strategic planning, in operational planning, and in budgetary planning. In the area of strategic planning, it's very important that blue teams, the defenders, understand what's valuable in the organization and understand the correlation of tools to valuable assets. In terms of the operational planning aspect of things, you have people, processes, and technology. And in the realm of red team versus blue team, this attack scenario helps expose the people to real world circumstances, if you will. So it is a test of their awareness and their technical skills and methods. One of the things I make sure I do with red and blue team is I ensure that my security vendors are engaged in the process as coaches for the blue team. So the security vendors, it's to their advantage to have a company know how to use the tools required and to continue to use those tools. So it's a great opportunity if you involve your vendors in red team, blue team, they can see if your team is fully utilizing the capabilities of the tools you already have. So operational planning, certainly in terms of process, Team Blue Team helps test your incident response plan, which in my opinion, IRPs can always be improved. So it's a good exercise in that sense. And budgetary planning, the end results of red team, blue team expose opportunities. It could be opportunities with your people who need additional training. It could be opportunities to acquire different tools or different combinations of tools that you already have. So the last point I would make about red team, blue team is communication is absolutely critical. Because with red team, blue team, the goal is making the enterprise more secure. And so in the end, you want the red team to communicate to the blue team, here's exactly what we accomplished, and more importantly, here's how we did it. In an organization, your weakest link is very often your supply chain. And it's a good opportunity with red team, blue team, for that red team to explain, here's where in your supply chain I found an opportunity to enter your systems.
Robert, I love your detailed explanation there, because people are the most important resource here, and we need to focus on every single aspect in wherever they go. And if the supply chain disrupts, there is a huge issue that could crash down in terms of business. Jaydeep, how do you see this? Is that the same layout or strategy that you sort of overlook? Is it more similar?
Yeah, very similar to what Robert explained. It's more about where red teamers are doing the offensive work. It's like we are breaking into the system internally. So it's always good to fail internally rather than waiting for the adversaries to break in. So that gives us an opportunity to see how the security systems are working. And basis that, we need to improvise on the overall people, process, and technology aspects to make it more better security posture for the organization.
Darrell, based on your experience working in different areas, how do you see this adaptation taking place?
So the use of red team, blue team in this offensive defensive concept is a great one, because security is a journey in resilience, right? And this journey is not something that we can just do once and be good at. No matter how much money we throw at our perimeters or our the preventative technologies, you are always going to have an adversary that finds a way around those. So building this red team helps us to understand better, or the offensive capabilities, understand better how the threat is evolving, and then what measures we need to take to better have processes, people, technology. Where do we need to make those investments so that we can better offset those threats? The defensive piece is obviously, it's right into that layer of hygiene, right? Being able to do the right things, making sure that we're addressing patches as they come out. We're highly dependent on our partners, right? So when researchers identify a problem, those patches and things, those weaknesses, those become something that we have to depend on the partners to provide a solution for. But we can also have other measures in place, like our detection capabilities and how we censor the network or our endpoints, to make sure that we're addressing those weaknesses and able to develop a robust response capability.
I like that interesting point where you said how we detect and how we kind of prepare ourselves in certain areas, which also leads me to my next point of, does it help you sleep thinking that cyber team has a plan to respond after you've been hacked? It shouldn't, but organizations have used a react and defend approach to cybersecurity for years. But if you think that this strategy is enough to protect organization from breach, I think a lot of them are mistaken there with the way people go forward. The best defense is always good offense. But we'd like to know your thoughts on this. Jaydeep, I'd like to start with you to see what's your perspective in the most effective defensive technologies that's out there.
Thank you, Sharon, for the question. So I have few slides to share, like the most effective defensive technology. So as Robert and Darrell both mentioned, that it's a journey and it's endless. Like you keep investing, and there are a lot of solutions that you need to work upon to secure your organizations, your business, government. So here, what we believe is you need to make the best use of what you have. And first, to start, before getting into the defensive technologies, a few advantages the attackers would have. So the number one advantage in a war that the attackers would have is they do the first move. It's not the cybersecurity who's attacking first. It's the adversaries who are initiating the attack from their side. So in any war, the first advantage goes to them, where they have the advantage of the first move. They're too much passion driven. Like the hacking and the offensive is a field which drives with a lot of passion. So the people who are the adversaries, they have the good advantage of the passion that they carry with them. They are objective driven. That is, like their mind is full of the objectives. So that's again an advantage with the adversaries. They are a combination of the human intelligence and the lot of bots and the automations that they do with different tools and technologies. So that's again an advantage. These are few of the advantages, and they've always mastered the tactics that needs to be used in the attacks. So that's the few advantages that I would like to highlight. Then most of the time we see that attackers, when they are doing the sophisticated attack, they are able to win it. Like they are always winning. So there is a good reason behind it. It's like they have been able to divert the CISOs, the management. They are able to come out with new techniques to attack from their side. Because their focus is on tactics and not on the techniques. Like their focus is to get into the system with the initial access, doing the execution, maintaining their foothold in terms of the persistence, doing the privilege escalation, discovery, then followed by the defense evasion that they would do, credential access, lateral movement, collection, CNC, that is establishing the command controls, exploitation, and impacting the organization. So overall, they are very clear with the tactics that needs to be followed, and for which whatever is required to achieve this, like to get in, stay inside the networks, stretch across the network, that is stretching, doing the lateral movements, and finally achieving the objectives. So they are very focused on the tactics, which are the objectives. And most of the time we have seen cybersecurity losing this because they're too much focused on the techniques rather than the tactics. And the advantage the tactic based, the objective based approach the adversaries have is like they are focused on achieving their goals and objectives, and not on different techniques that would be used. So they will be changing different process, methodology, tools that are used. So techniques could be endless, and what we try to prevent, detect from our side is the technique and not the tactic. So that's where most of the cybersecurity is losing and failing. So what objective cybersecurity should have is, like as rightly mentioned during the start of the conversation, that attacks are inevitable. We cannot stop them from happening. They will happen. But then the focus that we need to bring is, like, we need to get that attacker's sense to focus on the techniques and tactics and not the techniques. So that's, we'll also have to start thinking of how we can prevent them against the different tactics that they are trying to achieve. And what you can improvise is like reducing the mean time to detect and reducing the mean time to response, which is most important, because we cannot say that after having everything in place you are completely secure. So what you need to focus more is reducing the mean time to detect and mean time to respond back to the incidents that are happening. So with this attacker sense, what you need to focus is the entire kill chain which is like if an attacker is trying to do the reconnaissance, trying to do his information gathering at the initial stage, we need to have certain controls to detect those and prevent. If we fail at that stage, and if they are able to get in and they are able to weaponize, from weaponize they are able to deliver something, then probably we need to have some mechanism to uncover the zero-day exploits that are executed by them. We should have the detection and prevention systems there. Again, when they're trying to exploit, we should be able to recognize the unauthorized actions that they are trying to take. And when they're trying to install something in the environment to establish those APTs, we should be able to detect those APTs at that layer. And finally, when they are trying to do and command control in any of the systems in the environment, we should be making it sure that our data is safe and we are able to block. So most important is like we'll have to think as an attacker, and at each layer, at each part of this chain, we need to have the controls to detect and prevent, so that we have the better incident response. So that's the best and the most effective defense strategy, and trying to make use of everything that you have and trying to configure, integrate, and optimize in the best possible ways to achieve the incident response.
Thanks a lot, Jaydeep, for taking us through that presentation, and it was very nicely detailed to us. Darrell, Robert, I'd like to hear your feedback. Darrell? Darrell? Can you hear me? It's on mute.
Yes, it wouldn't unmute. Technology, we have to love it. No, the ability to interrupt in monitoring and detection is obviously, we can put, like I said before, we can put as much technology and money into the perimeter and blocking, but bad things happen, regardless of what we, no matter how much we throw at it. And we have to be able to do just as Jaydeep said, we have to be able to detect something and take the appropriate action to interrupt the attacker. The attacker has the benefit of timing, right? They control the time up until the attack starts, and then we have to be able to sense them in our environment. That interruption, and that's where I came in with the censoring of our networks, right? The appropriate censoring of the networks gives us an understanding of where those attackers are moving, how they might be transiting our environment. And we, on our side, we have some assumptions. We assume we understand what they're after, but we don't always, right? Their objectives are still in their head and not in mine. And I'm making those assumptions of where I need to do and how I need to interrupt their efforts. But spot on with that Jaydeep.
Robert, any views on that?
I agree with Jaydeep's kill chain, and I think it is very important that early recognition of an event is one thing, but understanding that mindset of the attacker, that there's more coming. And oftentimes I find this to be a cultural expectation that there was a problem and we fixed it. But the mindset in cybersecurity is these things are all connected. And even if you solve today's problem, it will be used against you in the future. And one of the things we assume is that attackers know as much about our network and our business as we do. And so it becomes important to have the expectation that there will be more. And as Jaydeep pointed out, sometimes it's right away, but sometimes it's months later that you will find things were correlated back to earlier events. So I think that kind of analysis at the closure of an event or the resolution is to say, how is this related to past events, and how could it be used in combination with past knowledge gained through attacks to attack us in a different way in the future.
Robert, you're very spot on in what you said. So I really appreciate all three of you giving your views. I also would like to invite questions from the audience. You can ask anything so that we can link into our conversation and see how much we can support you in your businesses and as an individual per se. I also would like to ask my audience another question as well. What is the best outcome of a red-blue team exercise? Is it cyber resilience or improved incident response or cyber organization reorganization or discovery of critical vulnerabilities? We'd like you to take a minute and click on either of these bullets to see how much of ratio stands at, and especially to get a vote from our audience, because we have a participation of 180. Thank you for joining us on our webinar. We're on an interesting subject, getting some very great insights on how to prepare ourselves, how do we base ourselves, and also face on not just one incident, but as a continuation process, how do we support? So what is the best outcome of a red-blue team? And here are the results for you. I think we quickly saw it like a flash. Okay, it's interesting to see. 40% of this discovery of critical vulnerabilities and improved incident response. Jaydeep, how do you see these results? Jaydeep, you're mute. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes. Yeah. So rightly pointed out by the audience, it's about like you need to detect all the critical vulnerabilities across the landscape, and that's where the red team plays a very important role. And once these vulnerabilities are detected and the red teamers are able to successfully penetrate inside the environment, we need to have the right incident response in terms of what should be our strategy in terms of the detection and the prevention, and what should be our workflow for the same. So that needs to be part of it. So our audience is quietly rightly addressed, I would say.
Darrell, Robert, what are your views on this?
I agree with the audience. I think incidents response planning can always be improved after an exercise, and discovery of those critical vulnerabilities, because the red team only needs to find one way in, and the blue team needs to defend the entire organization. So it's a good exercise. And like I said, I agree with the audience's perspective.
Darrell, how do we prepare ourselves now in a situation like this? We've seen a fantastic response from the audience, so it shows that we need to prepare ourselves in a different perspective.
Definitely. So incident response is critical to being able to achieve cyber resiliency. So I think that where the audience is seeing that is incident response and mitigation of vulnerabilities. Those are critical. And through those, we'll actually achieve that cyber resilience, right? Because at the end of the day, I can be great at my job, but if I can't keep the organization doing what it does to be profitable, then I haven't been successful as a security leader in one of the assurance activities.
Darrell, I think you've been extremely vulnerable in your area of expertise, and I'm sure that would have been a tough task in every kind of work that you approach all these years. But I'm also going to link this to cybersecurity today has come very complex. Protecting data of the company is now more important than ever, and multiple cybersecurity integrations that companies need to approach are more considerate. How would you describe OODA or ODS deception MTD methodology? I'd like to ask Jaydeep on this.
Thank you, Sharon, for the question. Yeah, so like we have been into cybersecurity space since more than 2 decades now, and we have seen a lot of companies implementing a lot of controls and a lot of technologies. But what we have seen is like earlier when it was incident response, it was few technologies on which the companies had to work. But with time now, the growing complexity, growing landscape, what you need is like you need to have the right integration of different tools and technologies that you have, doing the right orchestration, automation for your incident response. So we have adopted OODA, which is again learned from the physical scenario itself, where in a real attack, in the real life scenario where there is an attacker who is attacking you, first thing that you need to do is observe him. Once you observe him, the second step is to set the right orientation. Where is he trying to attack? He's trying to target your stomach, head, leg. So that orientation is important. Once that orientation is there, as a third step, you need to decide whether you want to counter attack or you want to block it. So basis that decision, you need to take that action. So that's the OODA process that is followed in the real life scenario. So with all the experience, what we understand is like attackers prepare to target and business the company by doing the complete information gathering in terms of understanding about the business, understanding about the company, the kind of users, application, operating system, everything is being used. And then they will also target the entry points to get inside the network. That could be from the endpoints, could be from the emails, applications, OT, IoT environments that is used by the companies, third-party applications that are used, third-party communications, the ecosystems, the stakeholders that are there in place, and with the growing cloud, the cloud environments that are used by the clients. So this is how they would actually scan for the entire landscape, and that's where this OODA strategy can help to have the right workflows with the right integration of different tools. So I have a few examples to share, which we normally implement for all our clients. Where first is where you have the best of the endpoint controls in place, you have the best of the endpoint security solutions in place, but still it requires a continuous threat hunting and the threat monitoring to see if there is some malicious behavior that is going on. So as a first step, when we are running an SOC, what we do is like we run the observe step by understanding the behavior aspect, the malicious behavior that is happening. So that is done using the SIEM technology. Then what we do is like as a next step, we have various run books that run for us with the different integrations that we have with different threat intelligence platform, which is the orientation of the behavior that we see. So what we do is we analyze the IP address from where this behavior is coming. If there is some file involved, then we do the hashing of the file and doing the analysis of it. If the current systems are not able to detect the malwares, we still check with other systems and see if those systems are able to tell whether there is a malware. So this is the kind of different integrations that would happen. And in parallel, the auto response in terms of it will send a notification on SMS, email. It will also open the ticket. And once we have the complete orientation with this workflow, we need to decide if we want to block particular file, isolate an endpoint, block particular IP address on the firewall. So all those actions needs to be taken. So that's one sample of the overall workflow that is required to have the automatic incident response. Then second example is like email phishing, as already mentioned by Robert. Like we have all the solutions deployed. We are blocking best of the techniques, but attackers will come out with new ways to send those phishing email, and those phishing emails definitely get delivered within the organization, and that is becoming very critical. And that's where once the email is sneaking and it is able to bypass the security controls, in this particular example, what we do is we also involve the user. So users are already trained, and we make them understand that what is the kind of phishing email it will look like, and basis that they also need to be part of this incident response, where immediately a particular user is receiving an email, he needs to forward that email or send that email. We have also reached to a level where you can just click on a button and that email will be sent to an IR email, which is an incident response email. Again, after receiving that email on that incident response email, we run a run book to see the header of that particular email that has been received, trying to analyze the link which is shared by the adversary, in that phishing email, trying to analyze the attachment which was sent. So doing the all-round orientation of the phishing email that was sneaked in inside the networks and already reached the user, but then we run the complete run book to see the complete threat intel around it with the orientation. And again, we open up a ticket with the SOC team so that they can start investigating immediately. And basis all the analysis that we get from this threat intelligence, we take a decision to block that particular domain IP address in the email security gateway, in the perimeter firewalls, also on the some controls on the endpoint machines that are running. So all those incident response is something that we work upon. Then another example is where like application attacks, be it the web attacks or the brute force attacks on the SSH or any other application servers, they're bound to happen. So the mistakes that normally we make or the clients make or the cybersecurity team makes is like we don't have the complete workflow defined for doing the complete threat hunting of what was happening. So in case if you've detected something in terms of the SSH brute force that is happening and your SIEM is able to detect it, we need to have the complete integration to check with different threat intelligence platform which are available to set the orientation, do all the required enrichments, again open up a ticket with the SOC team so that they can start further investigation on that particular IP address from where the brute force was happening, and immediately take a decision to block an IP address if it was not blocked on whatever access controls that are available on the ecosystem. And with the growing cloud environment in the cloud attacks, where we have seen a lot of different companies having best of the controls, but then still not able to detect basics of the attacks and probably fail as well, and then from where the attackers are able to sneak in. Like for example, S3 file storage is used by the customers in the AWS environment, and where the attackers are able to upload certain files which are malicious files, and normally people don't have the required checks to detect if there is a malicious file that has been uploaded in the S3 bucket. And that's where what we do is like we have certain APIs which are called, and we can see and compare the Yara rules for that, and we can see whether that are malicious files that are uploaded on the S3 bucket. And as soon as we are able to see that, we again run the complete orientation with different threat intel platform, and with that we also take a decision and block that particular IP address from where that file was uploaded in the S3 policy. So to that level, the incident response workflow can be defined, and that's what we have been doing as part of our OODA lifecycle. Coming to ODS, which is offensive defensive strategy against all odds. So what we do believe is like we have seen all different tools and technologies across the landscape, but we all come from this offensive background, and we use maximum use of the deception platform, wherein the way the attacker has the advantage to lure, engage, and fool the users and the businesses. Same way, we also can deploy deception across the landscape in such a way that we can have fake systems running, fake file systems running, fake containers running, fake S3 buckets running. So we can have fake user and passwords. So all different tactics that we can play so that when the attackers are able to bypass any of the technologies and they are trying to move laterally, we can immediately detect. This will also help us to reduce the false positives, get our personalized threat intelligence. And in all wars, it has always been believed that all war is about deception, and deception is the best tactic that has been used. The same tactic can be used by the cybersecurity, wherein planting different fake systems across the landscape to kill the cyber kill chain and detect the attacker from laterally moving. So that's where deception has been used. And the major advantage of deception is where all the technologies across the landscape, where it is same for the attacker and the user. Well, this is the only technology which an attacker should never be touching. So as soon as anybody is trying to touch this technology, it's an attack. So that's the biggest advantage that you have with deception. And again, now one example where how we can detect the ransomware attack using deception. For example, if there was some email which was bypassed and the security mail gateway was not able to block it, the email was received by the user. The user clicked on some link or on attachment, and the attacker was successful in injecting it inside the endpoint. And then probably he's trying to encrypt all different data stores that are there within that particular endpoint. And what we can always do is we can have one drive or few files or few folders which are decoy files which will be placed within that endpoint. And as soon as somebody is trying to touch, immediately we get an alert in terms of the SOC team gets an alert, and we can have an immediate action of isolating that particular endpoint. Same way, for him to move laterally, he will try to look for other file servers within that network, and that's where we can have few decoy file servers being placed. And as soon as he's trying to touch that file server or trying to encrypt few files inside this particular decoy file server that is being placed, immediately the SOC team gets an alert and we can trigger the incident response. I have one example where we are having a cloud environment and where we can create some fake decoys in terms of decoy S3 services itself. So as soon as anybody is touching that fake S3, trying to access this, we immediately run the complete threat intelligence, get the orientation, open up the ticket with the SOC team, and immediately we take an action to block that particular IP address on the S3 policy. So that's how we can also use deception on the cloud environments as well. And with the MTD, which is moving target defense, we have seen most of the technologies, be it EDRs or the endpoint solutions, the antivirus, all depending upon the signatures, the AI, ML. Most of the time, what fails is the fileless attacks, the memory evasive attacks that are executed by the attackers, and which is now more than 60% of the overall endpoint attacks that are happening. So what advantage the attackers take here is, like, they know the vulnerable application that is running on the server or on the endpoint. They know the DLL structure that is running for that particular application inside the memory, and they can always target the structure that is known to them, and they are able to plant and particular malicious code within that environment. So that's the advantage that the attacker would have, and that's where we use moving target defense by installing a very thin client agent on all the servers and endpoint across, which has been explained here in a physical scenario where attacker can always attack when there is a static watchtower that is there, and it's easy as well. In a scenario 2 where there are multiple watchtowers, but again those are static, so that also can be targeted easily. But the third scenario where you have multiple watchtowers, and all these watchtowers are constantly moving, so it's very difficult to target. So that's how the moving target defense works in the actual environment as well, where the DLL structure inside the memory is randomized to a level where the attackers would not know the actual structure which they are knowing, and it will be constantly moving, so we will be able to block it. Second is like the anatomy of this attack, where the attacker executes a particular malicious attack in terms of successful in phishing email, and are able to strike the memory attack, and then probably they will be able to do the credential stealing, privilege user access, and data exfiltration. That's where the moving target defense, what it can do is, like, as soon as somebody is trying to attack on your memory, it will immediately block. So that's again an advantage. And the way to the level which we implement this combination of the moving target and the deception is, like, as soon as we detect something on the endpoint or the servers, we immediately also dynamically deploy different deception in that particular VPC if it's a cloud environment, or in a VLAN, so that we can catch the lateral movement of the attacks. So that's the moving target defense.
Jaydeep, if I ask you, thank you for that very detail. What's the critical point from here? I know now when you see it as an overall view, it'll be like anywhere. You prepare yourself at any given point. I'm sure Darren and Robert will share we would love to hear examples, but unfortunately we know that we can't express every detail as in terms of an example. But if I ask you, where is the critical point where you need to focus here, where would that be, Jaydeep?
So I will again back to the question one, Sharon, where I asked that we should be using the best of the technologies and optimally using it, and trying to kill that chain. So again, with the deception and moving target defense, we are doing the same thing by deploying different decoys across the landscape. We are trying to break that kill chain so that we are able to detect and prevent the incidents that are happening.
Thank you very much, Jaydeep, for taking us that. Now, we know that the world is evolved, leading to a lot of advancing technology, and alongside a lot of threats. Organizations are always looking at investing in more in building a strong and functional cybersecurity infrastructure to protect their facilities and assets from internal and external threats. It depends on the industry that we're talking about. We want to know, I will probably start with Robert, your opinion about the role of offensive defensive strategies against all odds for an enterprise.
Well, I would go back to something basic, and that is understanding supply chain and your organization. Every person is a part of a supply chain in life, and every organization is a part of someone's supply chain. In warfare, there is a principle, know your enemy, and understanding where you sit in the supply chain is very important to your question. Trying to determine what is most important, it may mean understanding who your customers are and what is it you provide to them, because an attacker may have the ultimate goal of a giant corporation and they're using you to get to that corporation. Understanding that, I think, is critical to deciding where for your organization you need to focus. One of the areas, depending on your organization, is an attacker more likely to be after money or data? And those are two, I think, important branches of focus in terms of defending against all odds. It's something very basic, understanding what is most at risk for you and how you pose risk to your clients.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for taking us through that. Darrell, do you have anything to add there?
So I going with what Robert said, right, is what we're seeing now is an increase in our supply chain, right, attacks. The most recent being a very large thing that affected 18,000 or so companies. And those kinds of attacks are going to probably be on the rise. Recognizing that our supply chain is probably one of those things that hasn't traditionally been as well monitored, and it's hard to get your supply chain to a lot of times share enough information that you can make those risk decisions. But as a member of that supply chain, I may not be the ultimate target, right? I might be just a door to the target, and that's where the attackers have a little bit of the advantage, right? They know where they're trying to get to, and you may only be one of their vectors that they're trying to go through while they're doing it. Having the OODA, that is a very traditional technique in the military side. So understanding your foe, your enemy, straight out of Sun Tzu, right? If you don't understand your enemy, you don't know how to defend against them, what their style is, what their tactics, techniques, and procedures are. So you don't know how to best interrupt those activities. And I think what Jaydeep brought up is it's great, right? Using the ability to spin up a deceptive technology to increase your detection capabilities further increases your understanding of the enemy and how they're trying to move through your environment. If you have a file server that's based on HR and a file server that's based on proprietary information and they're going only after HR, then you can start seeing where their interests lie. So it can help focus a lot of your efforts. And we're all resource constrained. We only have so many things that we can focus on at one time. So I think this is great efforts.
Okay, I think this unmute button is taking a bit of a time. I've got one last question to ask from the rest of, or from the panelists, just to get your viewpoints with what we've been discussing so far, which has been very enlightening and a lot of awareness content. Can you describe your thoughts about red team and breach and attack simulation? Robert, I'd like to start with you.
Yes, I think it should be an important part of corporate planning, if you will, or security planning at some level to engage in red team, blue team. This will help you rationalize the money you spend, explaining that to the non-technical executives. They do understand money. That's why they're in business. So red team, blue team helps with that. And I would say communication is super important between the red team and the blue team. Understanding, it goes back to the question you just asked. Understanding your enemy, the blue team needs to understand how is the red team thinking about my organization? How does the red team see my vulnerabilities and to exploit them? And I'd say, just as a parting word to the participants in the webinar, I just want to say thank you to all of you that this is a team sport. Cyber warfare needs an expanding team of people around the world, and I want to thank you for your efforts day in, day out. Sometimes it's a thankless job, but thank you for adding to your expertise and participating with this community of security professionals. So hats off to you.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Robert. And it's also more like keeping, I mean, it's just like simple marketing, isn't it? Prepare yourself from your competitor as to how you want to step out and be there, and also attack at the right time. Yeah, Darrell, what's your view on this?
So red team, blue team, or purple teaming, right? It's definitely something you do. That's how you really refine your capabilities. As I mentioned before, security is not a destination, it's a journey, and understanding that resilience and how we can achieve it best for our organization, as Robert brought up, we have to communicate and risk to the executive team and make sure that they're understanding what we're doing with the money. Are we reducing the risk? Are we, a lot of times security is seen as a cost center, right? So being a cost center, you have some delivery, some value you have to bring. So the red team is a great way to demonstrate where you have opportunities for improvement, and then hone it with by making those alliances. And actually, some of the best blue teamers I know have actually started on the red team and understand how that technique works. Then they switch over to the blue team and become they find more value, although it doesn't always look as glamorous.
Jaydeep, I'm going to ask you a question on from the audience perspective, which has come in. Is deception useful in cloud environments? A question that has come from the audience.
Yes, so I already had one example where we have, I would say, deployed the fake S3 service. So again, the cloud workloads and the cloud environments are nothing but a technology infrastructure and the technology landscape that we are trying to cater. So the way we deploy deception in the on-premises and data center, similar way for the entire kill chain and understanding from where the attacker can get in and what is the next move he is trying to do. We can have multiple ways to deploy deceptions for the cloud environment. Could be in terms of the fake services that we can spin off, the fake user and password that we can spin off inside the server, fake files that we can spin off, the fake different servers itself that we can spin off, and we can go to a level where we can have the private clouds, which are the VPCs itself. We can spin off, which is the complete deceptive for the attackers to target, and we can clearly engage what they are trying to do, and based on the techniques and the procedures that they are using, we can have our defense strategy for the same. So definitely in cloud environment we can deploy deception, and it's very useful as well.
All right, we've come down to the last final minutes of today's webinar. Darrell, we'd like to hear your last and final thoughts. Any advice that you'd like to give our viewers today?
Using or having that focus on monitoring detection is critical. We've traditionally done a really good job at prevention, but the transition over the last 5 to 7 years there to the monitoring and detection, and then the integration of deception technologies really enhances your capabilities in detecting those adversaries. So thanks to everybody for attending today.
Thank you, Darrell. And Robert, any final thoughts to our viewers?
I agree with Darrell. Monitoring is critical throughout the enterprise. Monitoring, sense of human monitoring, what's happening in that phishing and vishing space, and also on the technology side of things. Monitoring, sensing throughout the environment is just a key aspect of this, because of the fact that attacks play off each other and they're used strategically by the adversaries, and we need to think about that. So yes, it's about monitoring the environment.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you very much. Jaydeep, your final thoughts?
I'm in complete agreement with very experienced Darrell and Robert who came to this particular webinar and shared their thoughts. Very thankful for the audience also who joined us in this webinar. So thank you very much as Infopercept from our side. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Darrell, Robert, Jaydeep, it's been a real pleasure having you on board to discuss some very interesting insights. Also, a very special thanks to our audience for joining in. You've been with us till 10:30, which is our time here in India and Sri Lanka. Just a quick wrap up for you. We have a special notice or invitation for our attendees. You will receive a copy of the Infopercept's white paper labeled An Introduction to Integrating Deception Technology and Moving Target to Defense as a Strategy for Strengthening Your Cybersecurity Posture. All you got to do is just visit www.infopercept.com or find out more details following by sending an email. Thank you very much to all our panelists for joining us today. It's been great having you on board. And if you need more information, do check out the website for more details. Gentlemen, have a great day in the US. And it's probably a very late night here in Sri Lanka and India. We certainly hope you stay safe from COVID and have yourself an enjoyable evening. I'm Shram Mascarini, wishing you a very pleasant evening here in Colombo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.